Israelis have been going through a 2-year cycle of election, government formation, collapse, and repeat. In this fourth cycle, there is little suspense. Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu and his Likud party are expected to get the most votes, even though more than half of Israelis recently polled want him out.
You are not voting for your ideology, you are voting against someone. So it's very hard to build a country like this. You cannot vote because you don't want someone. You have to vote because you want something happen. And that's the problem.
Netanyahu needs to get 61 seats in the Knesset to form a government. No one ever has. So the question is, who would he form a coalition government with? He's alienated former allies and is facing stiff competition from within the right.
I think he's been a wonderful politician for Israel in the past. He's been in power way too long, and he has too many issues surrounding him at this point. I'd really like to see a change, and it surprises me that the whole country isn't behind that idea.
Janet Melzer is a liberal voter who, like many others, believes Israelis have a fifth election on the horizon.
Really concerned where the direction the country's going. Lack of respect for the other, total lack of respect for the other. No understanding of civil rights or democracy.
Voter participation in the previous election was 71%. Pollsters predict a lower turnout. For now, Israelis vote and wait to see if their country can move past this unprecedented political limbo.
Let's take a look at the main candidates in the fray. Netanyahu is head of the Likud party, but he's also on trial for corruption. He is hoping his efforts to get people vaccinated quickly against COVID-19 and the normalization of ties with some Arab countries will keep him in the lead. His former chief of staff, Naftali Bennett, and head of the right-wing Yamina party, has criticised the Prime Minister's handling of the pandemic. But he hasn't ruled out joining a Likud-led government after the election. Another right-wing challenger is Gideon Saar. He's the leader of the New Hope Party, which supports settlement construction in the occupied West Bank and opposes the Iran nuclear deal. His political agenda is similar to Netanyahu's, but he's not interested in a coalition partnership. And finally, there's TV host turned politician Yair Lapid. He heads the opposition centrist Yesh Atid party. He is considered one of the strongest candidates and was once a coalition partner in a Netanyahu-led government back in 2013. Let's go to Dalia Schindlin, who is a public opinion strategist. She joins us from Tel Aviv. Many thanks for speaking to us, Dalia, on Al Jazeera. Now, Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu is hoping that the country's fast vaccine rollout will push him into a stable majority. But not everyone is convinced about how he's handled that coronavirus pandemic, are they?
No, in fact, the vaccination rollout, as successful as it has been, is only the most recent thing to happen in a year of his trying to manage the pandemic in ways that have drawn a lot of fire, including from some of his own supporter constituencies. But I have to say that for the most part, it seems like the majority of voters are filtering their assessment of Netanyahu's handling of the pandemic through their pre-existing views of him as prime minister. So there's plenty of criticism of him from those who want, a government that does not include the ultra-Orthodox parties, who support a more liberal approach to Israeli society, and they think that he has given in too much to the ultra-Orthodox communities in imposing sweeping lockdown measures, presumably for political reasons, even though the ultra-Orthodox community had much higher rates of infection through COVID. That is the main point of contention over his handling of the pandemic. And those people have not changed their minds in being angry at him because of the vaccination rollout, even though they give him credit for it. Naturally, of course, his supporters give him lots of credit for the vaccination rollout, but they were already supporting him.
Indeed, picking up on that point, is it not extraordinary that people's minds are so little changed when it comes to Prime Minister Netanyahu? I mean, it's remarkable. He's on trial on charges of bribery, fraud, breach of trust, but still he remains where he is in terms of his popularity.
His staying power is quite remarkable. I've worked as a strategist on 8 national campaigns in Israel and in about 15 other countries, and it is unusual to see an incumbent in power for 12 years consecutively, a total of 15 years, and his his standing in Israeli society, such as it is, in the sense that about 25 to 29% of the voters have supported him in recent elections, is really quite impressive as a political feat. However, it's not terribly surprising because we've had 3 elections in very quick succession. And all of the factors that we're talking about, save for the COVID management, which is a brand new issue, they were all in place even ahead of the April 2019 elections. The investigations against Netanyahu were known. It was clear that he would be indicted. And in the course of 2019 and 20, he was indicted and his trial started. But voters knew all of that even going into the April 2019 elections. So it's not that surprising that they haven't changed their minds one way or another about whether they support or oppose him.
But this time
and
around,
as you correctly pointed out, a majority of Israelis do prefer that he not continue being prime minister, but because of our coalition system, he may very well be.
Sorry to interrupt you. This time round, he does face new challenges from right-wing contenders as well. How is that likely to play into any election result?
Well, it does seem like he has lost votes. If you look at the average of all the surveys and the general trend in the many, many, many surveys Israeli media have conducted during this campaign, he has 36 seats in the outgoing parliament. That is out of 120, making him the biggest party. But in all surveys and in all averages of all surveys, he is not getting any higher than 32. But in most surveys, he's reaching between 28 and 30 seats. Now, there could be many reasons for that decline, and we also might see additional support for Likud on election day tonight when the polls come out, when the exit polls come out, which is something that's happened in the past, but it doesn't look like he's going to be able to repeat 36 seats. And so to some extent, that is partly because of these right-wing challengers. But to be honest, the right-wing challengers haven't done all that well because he's still in top place by double digits, both in terms of the number of seats he's getting in Knesset, in the parliament, and leading in terms of the percentage of Israelis who vote for him, towering over those right-wing challengers. Each of them, Naftali Bennett and Gidon Saar, are barely getting between 8 and 10% of the vote. And so they have sort of created an alternative, but there is just a stalwart base of support for Likud and Netanyahu. And I think that Gidon Saar looks like he's on the path that Moshe Kahlon took just in the 2015 elections, not that long ago, also trying to create a Likud breakaway, also won 10 seats, but then couldn't survive politically, and his party no longer exists.
Really interesting to get your thoughts. Dalia Shinlin, public opinion strategist, speaking to us there from Tel Aviv. Well, we can turn to our correspondent, Natasha Ghoneim, who is live for us in Tel Aviv as well. Natasha, you're out on the streets. What is the mood out there of voters? What kind of turnout are we seeing?
Well, we're in Tel Aviv, as you mentioned, and turnout is 10% lower than it was during the previous election cycle at this point in time. If you look behind me, there is a big sign here that says March 23rd. All of us, it's in our hands. Obviously, an attempt to try to boost voter turnout for people who may have election fatigue after now having to been asked to vote for a 4th time in 2 years. We spoke to voters in Jerusalem earlier in the day, and again, this all boils down to a referendum on Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu. For those who are supporting Netanyahu, they're probably in good spirits because it's expected that the status quo will remain at the end of the night. And by that, I mean that right now, Netanyahu's Likud party is still expected to be the largest vote getter. Not enough to reach the threshold of a 61 seat in the Knesset, which is needed to form a government, but still enough that from there, Netanyahu would be expected to do what he's attempted to do 3 previous times, and that is to form a coalition government. For those who oppose Netanyahu, who say he's been in office too long, who have told us that they believe that the corruption trial that he is facing, it resumes next month. He is facing a fraud, breach of trust, and bribery charges. They say that they feel very hopeless. They feel that they don't understand why, despite more than 50% of Israelis who were recently polled saying they want Netanyahu out, why it seems like the political limbo will remain in Israel. Nonetheless, they did come out and vote, and it'll be interesting to see if voter turnout is high. A veteran pollster said that he did not expect voter turnout, especially due to the pandemic and perhaps due to election fatigue, to be as high as it was in the previous round of elections. That was 71%.
Natasha Ghoneim there for us in Tel Aviv. Many thanks.